Freaking out, man. You can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth.
What do all men in power want? More power.
My name is Gianluca Zanna. I was an Italian by birth, and I became an American by choice. Our lives and freedoms are in danger. This is not a drill. If you're listening to this broadcasting, you are the resistance.
All systems go.
Welcome to Love, Guns, and Freedom.
We're not afraid.
Here we go, guys and girls. Another Sunday, another show. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom on We Look at Zanna on K-Talks 1340 AM. And of course, also United States .fm network. I really like this show because it's kind of, let's say, different. We go from, we are a local radio station after all, okay? Even if there is a new little FM rebroadcast the show. By the end of the day, it's a tri-state local AM station. But lately, of course, with the internet, we started to reach, New Zealand, and then Australia, and then we go to Sweden, and then Italy, whatever. By the end of the day, I always say everything starts locally. And whatever problems we have here that we can fix, or at least we can try to make better, okay? We can inspire each other around the world. I really believe that the struggle for freedom from oppression, and when it comes to oppression, after all, it's always about somebody who wants to tell you how to live your life, lead your life, or live your life. In this form, in these days, the time of the past, we used to have the kings or the queen. In some country, you still have the queens or queen. Here we have government that we elect. Sometimes government that we elect go a little bit out of control. So it's really good that I really believe we get involved and we try to regain our rights working with our local governments. And I believe that there is a new effort, of course, now that is not just about the local government that we elect, but there is a global government called, of course, the United Nations global government that under ICLEI, and this is not a conspiracy, you can see the website, ICLEI.org, ICLEI, they try to implement different part of the agenda of the socialist New World Order agenda called also Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030. So now what it means that we can fight back if we have good decent human beings among our local governments to try to regain a little bit of our property rights. Now, one thing I like about Mohave County, that even when things are bad, it's always better than many other parts of the world. Because at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to really communicate, at least with our local, elected officials. And I like that. And people say, you got a show, that's easy for you. Not true, because even before I had a show, we always had a chance to reach out, even if we have to, in a peaceful way, complain, let's say, exercise our right. We always had that opportunity and the right. So I tell you, I think it's a great start. That's why I really believe we can make things better, we can inspire each other, and hopefully we can try together, regain our basic property rights. Now, I have with me a gentleman that I really like him, even sometimes I don't agree with him, but I think he's a great guy, because at least he's not afraid to tell you where he stands, and he sticks to his own principle. I like that. And he's a supervisor, of course, Mohave County Supervisor, Stephen Moss. Are you there, Stephen?
I am Luca. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Okay, let me call you now with the right title, Supervisor Moss. That's why we are here, okay? Official business. Now
we're Americans, and we can call each other whatever we like.
I know, but this is good.
Supervisor is optional.
Supervisor, you are a supervisor now, okay? Now, let's remind to the public, what type of, which district are you supervisor for? I mean, what is your district you represent?
District 5, which basically, if you follow the Colorado River from the southern border of Bullhead City to the first northern third of Lake Havasu City, Arizona, I cover that area.
Perfect. Last time we talked, was exactly just the day before the elections. You were not concerned, but, it's good to never be cocky, You're still waiting, say, hopefully it's going to be right. And you said, if it's not that, I'll be happy anyway. You have a great career as a lawyer. So, I like that. You don't look like a professional politician. Oh, my God, if you don't get a job, you're not going to pay the rent at the end of the year. So that's great. I like your attitude. And I was happy anyway that you made it, even I'm not in your district. And but tell me a little bit now, since the election time, how was your time in office? Did you have a good time? Did you, let's say, accomplish things you wanted to accomplish? How has been things?
Yeah, in some ways, it was a period, in my opinion, of great success. In other ways, it was a period of great failure. Great success in that, very early on in the first year, the new board got rid of a lot of administration. I think we shrank the administration budget from $1.3 million to like $400 and some $1,000.
Wow.
We got rid of the gun prohibitions in the county buildings. We said that, Americans are free people and they can carry a weapon, and if we're afraid of our citizens, we should probably move to a different country. We did things like that, which I thought was on the realm of civil liberties very early on, which
that was
I thought
the first term.
spoke well.
That was your first term, the first time when.
Yes.
Right.
Now, and we did things like that consistently throughout. Didn't raise taxes as a net matter anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into the second term, and the second term I was very hopeful. President Trump's election, the early signs on Wall Street, the picking up of building permits, that some of our economic doldrums maybe are behind us. And the difficulty with that, or the false hope of that, is county revenue is always lags well behind the private sector's revenue, and some of the problems that government embedded 10 years ago are finally coming home to roost, whether it's the pension systems, whether it's the road systems, things like that. I think it's going forward, it's economic challenges that we're facing. We still have to do things on the private property front and the civil liberty front. For example, we last Monday, as I think you referenced, we made some changes to the building code to allow people to build larger structures without a permit. Mm-hmm. But there's the major. I think the next year or two, the major focus is going to be dollars. It's going to be finances. It's going to be how do we pay these bills without going into debt and paying the bank a lot of interest.
I see. No, exactly. I was going to ask you that. One thing, one of the things came to my attention. I like Facebook. If you use it correctly, you can grab a lot of information that sometimes it's hard to keep up, just with local news, So there was this post by one of the local, let's say, I don't want to call him activist, but anyway, somebody that normally she's been also running for office, Jennifer Jones, and she wrote this one. Kudos to the Mohave County Supervisors for unanimously approving item 47 on today's agenda. They're pretty much what it says, adoption of Mohave County Ordinance, blah, 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 amending section, let's see, 11A3. But before we go to the numbers, as you said, the bottom line that you increase the size of residential accessory structures without utilities allowed without a building permit from 120 square feet to 300 square feet. That's pretty, people may say, wow, so what? Right? That's pretty big in my opinion, because normally they always government trying to get more. Here we have a little bit of attempt to give you less drama and more control of your own property. What's supposed to be, especially here in Mohave County, we don't live on top of each other like in New York. If I have 2 acres and if I want to build like, let's say, a chicken coop or any type of little structure that I know if I make it not correctly, it's going to fall on my head after all. I shouldn't be stressed out, going through every time all these permits and just because I want to move a couple of 2x4 from point A to point B. So I wanted to applaud you for that. That's what I wanted to say pretty much with this basic conversation today for start. But go ahead.
We did the same thing when we first adopted the building code. The most recent version that we have adopted is from 2012 of the International Building Code. I think most of the board is very aware that there's a lot of, because it's called the International Building Code because there's a lot of international policies in it, a lot of which we don't agree with. We deleted entire chapters or entire books of the building code, like the International Energy Conservation Code and the International Wildlife Code and all that. We just said no, we're not even going to consider those. And then to the portions that we did adopt, like the residential code, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, things that we thought dealt with public safety, is we gathered up a half dozen contractors and engineers and architects, and we said go through it and modify it so that it is safe but more property owner friendly. And they did that. They spent a year doing that, removing what I heard was called the sharp edges of that. And so we did that. And what we did Monday was just a continuation of that, because these things should never be stagnant. We always have to be looking at what can be done to improve personal freedom to the extent that we can. If we just pat ourselves in the back and go home, what's the point? Eventually you lose. You have to stay engaged all the time.
Listen, I'm very impressed, I must tell you, because last year we were talking about this international code, and part of me, I was freaking out. I think we also I had you on the show about it, because I say, oh my God, did you read the whole book? This is not just about a building code. This is about controlling properties. This has come from a global plan to create this sort of control over the resources, and at the end of the day, make very difficult for the individual to own private property. But I was so impressed that, not just you, but also the other supervisors, that sometimes I don't really agree, together, you understood that, and you decided to make this custom made for us, that we are, we don't want to just be part of this global plantation, at least in this part of Arizona, and I believe all over the U.S. The average human being doesn't want that. So I'm very impressed, because I tell you, what you just mentioned, you exactly pointed out the heart of the beast. This is not anymore about public safety. This is about controlling the resources. And I'm sure you're familiar. I mean, this is not anymore a conspiracy. A few years ago, people used to laugh at me. Now I know, for example, Supervisor Hildy, she's pretty well informed. I also gave a book. I donated a book to the county. It's called The Green Agenda. By I forgot the name. Anyway, the Agenda 21, it is not a conspiracy. It is a fact. And iclay.org, it's a fact that people can check. There are more than, I don't know, many municipalities. For example, are you familiar that Flagstaff officially is part of ICLAY, also called Agenda 21, and some others, let's say, counties, like, for example, Apache County in Arizona. Are you familiar with that name, iclay.org? ICLEI?
No, I don't know that organization, but I do know that there's cities and counties in Arizona and across the U.S. who their political officials have bought into that agenda, and that agenda is essentially, as I translate it, is to push people into cities, get them out of the rural areas, and to turn back the clock in a lot of ways. For example, in the federal government, under the prior administration, there were actually department heads and people who were convinced, because they're appointees, they're political appointees, which means they're political animals, that wanted to bring down the dams of the Colorado River, which so much the American Southwest relies upon.
Wow!
So it doesn't shock me that occurs, because elections have consequences, and when you elect the far left, you're going to get far left policies, and when you elect the far right, you're going to get far right policies. And where you feel comfortable, either on the left or the right or in between, is how people should vote. And they should pay attention, and they should not avoid going to the ballot box, because that's where our political future is that's the war where our political future is being waged, the ballot box.
Wow, I'm very impressed the fact that, seriously, doesn't happen every day, that there is an awareness, especially more than an awareness. Many politicians know what's going on, but the problem is that they like to go along with the plan, because at the end of the day, the grants, they're always given, or at least they use as instrument to persuasion, okay, when it comes to follow these directives. Now, I just sent you, by the way, and that's what I like about the show, and that's why I like the report that we have in Mohave County with you guys, because it's always a system we can help each other, to learn from each other. And I tell you, many things probably, even just feeding you guys with stuff that normally say you don't know, but at least it's our duty to try to help you, to give you this information. I remember Agenda 21, 5-6 years ago, people used to laugh. Now, it's been mainstream, when people also at, I don't know, even Glenn Beck used to talk about that a few years ago. I just sent you right now the website, www.iclei.org, that you will see now. There is a password. They used to be able to see all the municipalities used to be part. Now you must have a password. Why? Because when people start to find out that their own town or their own cities, their officials sold out to this new special word called, they call it sustainability, okay? It's a magic word for pretty much controlling the resources. They will realize that they are now under Agenda 21. So they don't call it Agenda 21 at local level, they call it under ICLAY, Local Government for Sustainability. So please check that out, and maybe, as a member of Mohave County, you can ask to be, to at least have a member login, and to double check all the other cities and towns that we have right now, that they are also in Arizona, as I said. But I want to applaud you really for the effort to understand what we are facing here, because you said exactly right. Now,
I'm looking at it right now, actually, and it's amazing. It looks like half the world has adopted it, and it's because I see the yellow is where Eichley's in place, and the not yellow is where Eichley is not in place, and it looks like Mohave County is not yellow, so that's good.
That's great. I tell you, I want to explain this to the regular people out there. Say this is not about the environment. I'm all for the environment. I want to preserve water. I want to have clean roads and no pollution in the air and everything else. This is about controlling the resources of humanity, starting from, even the garden that you want to build. For example, there is in Germany right now, I don't know if you're familiar, probably we don't care, we live here, but still, that's the way system works. In the next 2 years, the average German town will not be allowed to build anymore a single home, only apartments under Eichley, because after all, we do not need to live in a single house, but we will live stashed in apartments, like you said. That's the way they treat us. Meanwhile, we have the Al Gore of the world, living in a 40,000 square foot home. Okay, that's what a villa.
Right. I'm looking at it. Arizona has 8 Eichley members in it, and none of them are disclosed. None of them are identified. They just say they have 8 members in Arizona.
Yeah.
So it's not Mohave, I can tell you that.
No Mohave. A few years ago, when I found out about this website, it was available to the public with our magic password. I knew the Flagstaff was one, and not really surprised. I mean, but people need to understand how they make it difficult for you to live in that environment. Even the basic code for business becomes so overtaxed, so expensive, that they want you almost, that you don't do anything, pretty much. I mean, it is really difficult to operate as a human being. Don't even get me going about having access to water or building something. So I hope you can take a look more into this and maybe share with your other supervisors, colleagues.
I'll do that.
Perfect.
I would be glad to do that. It's always good to stay informed. I see that they're big on climate change also and carbon sustainability.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting group, it looks like.
Yeah, and you know what happened now, for example, in Canada under Trudeau with the new carbon tax. The average Canadian family, I was just in Canada a few weeks ago for business. They're going to pay about $500-600 a year just because, they're told so, just because they're breathing. I mean, that's pretty much what they want to do. I mean, they will pay because we emit CO2. That's the reality,
Yeah.
And, I don't understand how logic works. How can people even justify that? Just because we pay, we're going to save the world. I mean, this is like the time of the Pope. When you pay, you go to heaven. I mean, it sounds pretty similar to me. What do you think?
Well, in the days of the dinosaur, there was a lot more carbon in the atmosphere than there is now.
Yeah.
It's, I think that they're creating justifications because the purpose is to take control.
Yeah.
And so to justify control, you have to create a justification. And I think you referenced at your opening about medieval kings and queens. They decided to go to war frequently, and then when they made that decision for personal reasons, for greed, for power, they created some good excuse, like, the other person's a Catholic or a Protestant, or they insulted my name or whatever. But that was just an excuse. The reason they went to war was for greed and for power. It wasn't because they were trying to be a good Catholic or a good Protestant or a good this or that. They're gangsters and they wanted power. And to think that human nature has changed all that much from the Dark Ages, I think, is naive. The human beings in a cave in the Stone Age has the same character as a human being living in a 2,000 square foot house, air-conditioned house. It's just the pressures we're on is different, that's all.
I agree. And now, unfortunately, some of the kings, we elect them, and or at least, they sneak through, like the bureaucrats out there, that they pretty much stay no matter which administration. Now, let's talk about a little bit of things that you are not happy. You told me about good things that you're able to accomplish. Now, frustrations. I know that there has been some debates about getting more revenues for the sheriff department. The new sheriff, Mr. Schuster, seems like he needs more money. I understand that, unfortunately, the reality that we don't have enough, benefits like other departments. But at the same time, we've been spending some money, for example, in some other buildings. I heard, like the public work buildings. Tell me, what do you think now about increasing sales tax in Mohave County? Is something that we can avoid or we cannot avoid, according to you?
Well, we have time before a final decision has to be made, but I'm currently leaning, and I've said this publicly many times, to increasing the sales tax, preferably the sales tax. in order to deal with these issues. You mentioned the sheriff. He needs 129 deputies. We have 120 deputies, excuse me. We have 79, and we can't ever seem to grow past that point because they keep getting raided by other agencies because we don't pay them enough. That's about roughly a $3 million price tag. We lost some cases in front of the Arizona Supreme Court. I should say the state has lost some cases in front of the United States, the Arizona Supreme Court, and the county's been presented with a $38 million pension bill. That's not a debt we incurred because we're not in control of it, but it's a bill that's passed from the state to the counties and to the cities, and our share is $38 million. We have roads, which we have been putting Band-Aids on because of a lack of revenue for the last 10 years, and they're steadily deteriorating, and the engineers are reporting that 45% of them are approaching failure, and the other 55% will go within the next 10 years. And we were always $8 to $9 million behind on revenue. That's a problem because if we don't pay the pension, if we made minimum payments on the pension, if we made minimum expenditures on the roads, it's just like making a minimum payment on your house. You pay more interest and you pay longer, and it gets to the point where the interest is controlling the budget as opposed to saying, I'm going to make 2, 3, 4 times the monthly payment, and what was going to be a 30-year debt, I'm going to knock out in 6 or 7 years, and I'm going to pay very little in the way of interest. And to me, that's more financial sense because more tax revenue is being spent if you let these debts linger. If you pay them off quickly, less tax revenue is being spent. And that's what's bringing me around to it, because I hate taxes, but I hate debt worse. And it is because debt, my grandfather was a plumber. He was a very wise man, and he once told me, interest is for suckers. And that's true. If you're paying interest, you are a sucker. If people who buy new cars and they're paying interest when they could have bought a year or two older car for less money, they're going to change that car in 5 years. They're almost like feudal serfs because rather than the duke or the baron being the master, it's your bank which is your master because you're sending 5, 10, 15% interest to him every year on what you're making. Forget your taxes. You're sending him interest.
I agree. It's true. I mean, interest is always bad. It's always the master and the slave. That's the idea of banking system. But my point is one, I understand a problem must be fixed somewhere, but sometimes there are different ways too. I mean, cutting cost. I mean, also try to avoid to do necessary spending. I mean, one point I was looking at, there was one of the latest building that was built in the county. What is the Public Works building? I mean, it's a nice building.
Yes.
What is the one just outside Bank Street? Is that the one?
Yeah, there's 2 buildings out there, Public Works and Community Development Services. They were built back, I think, in 2008, 2010, and they took road dollars to build them. And that's before I was on the board, or Hildy was on the board.
I know that. I want to be clear. That was not under your administration. That's very important to know. But, by the way, I've been at that building just on the late note. I want to give you a little feedback as a taxpayer. They look beautiful. I mean, kind of, it looks almost like Beverly Hills, in my opinion, when you go inside, like some sort of a clinic. But it's really, my opinion, like a waste. I mean, we could have crammed that somewhere else, honestly, especially when you think what type of cost we had to pay for that, And that's the problem. Sometimes guys, we look at the politician. I don't like taxes, of course, but we also look at the last person holding the bucket of water. And unfortunately, there is somebody before they plug the hole in the water, And I'm sorry, now you're stuck with the bucket with the holes inside because, now everybody's focusing on you, of course, and the other supervisors. We have some money missing here, and we need to try to figure it out what to do. Anyway, we can cut some other costs. Forget about the past. What is done is done. I mean, what we can cut around here. Anything we can trim down a little bit.
In my opinion, there is a lot that we could cut, but it takes at least 3 votes to cut. And those 3 votes don't exist. And so we're kind of like almost in a Mexican standoff where, if I was to if I was 100% in control, I could balance this budget by 5 o'clock this evening without raising taxes.
Wow.
But I'm not 100% in control.
And give us.
I think the other supervisors could do the same thing. Now, they would have different priorities than I would have, but they could all do the same thing. The power is divided. And that means when it comes to cuts, I know we have 3 supervisors who think we've cut too much. And, for example, administration has been cut from 1.3 to 400 to 500,000. The only department which I think off the top of my head, which has grown over time, is law enforcement. I think they've grown a couple $1 million. And the others, if they have costs that have increased, it's because insurance costs are going up. The animal shelter, we privatized it to a small degree. They're still using a government building, even though they're providing the labor. And we went from roughly $800,000 down to $300,000 in costs. So we've been cutting and cutting and cutting. And I think there's more that could be cut, but I don't think there's 3 votes to make those additional cuts. I also think there's fund balances out there that we have overfunded. Some people call them reserves. The government calls them fund balances. I think they're overfunded, and I think there's too much money in there. But again, Hildy and I fought this battle last year. There's at least 3 who do not want to redirect those to pay down debt. They want to keep those reserves in place. Like there's a fund, what they call the Vehicle Replacement Fund, where they want to generate enough money in there to get it to $7 million so they can replace 5 years' worth of county vehicles in 1 check if they need to. I think that's kind of extreme. Maybe 1 or 2 years of reserves would be good, but you don't need 5 years' worth. But again, my opinion is 20% of the puzzle. And unless you get 60% of the puzzle, what's going to happen is, because even though I'm offended, or disappointed would be a better word, with some decision-making, those decisions have been made. And that does not change the fact that we owe $38 million to the pension system. It does not change the fact that our roads are going to fail, and it's going to cost, for every dollar of maintenance we did not do, it's going to cost us $4 to $10 to rebuild that road. So it's these financial catastrophes, that's my view, because that's how I feel about them, are looming. And it doesn't change it's like the old saying, you go to war with the army you have, not the one you want. And so that's where we're at, and I feel frustrated by that. I feel disappointed by that. I feel apprehensive because of that. But my distress doesn't change the reality. And that reality needs to be dealt with.
Well, I understand. At the same time, I hope, we not, because unfortunately, Mohave County, it's already a county mostly with, at least part of the county with people that are retired and fixed income. And property, when you start to increase, now we're talking about sale tax, of course. I don't want to mix with property tax, but it's all connected. When you start to go up, it's like a chain reaction. And property, I know already living in the county here, a lot of people that they are retired. And unfortunately, year after year, when the property tax goes up, they start to realize that there are less things they can do to enjoy life, or even just to live, if they don't want to lose their home. Because we discussed that in the past, and I like your position on that. We wish we could remove, you pay just one time the sale tax for your property, and then that's your property. Otherwise, it's like a lease or a rent that we pay every year. And the point is, sometimes you can afford. If you cannot afford anymore the rent, you lose your property. At least you don't have possession anymore. So all I say is difficult. But listen, I really appreciate because that's the spirit of our local government, at least in Mohave County. I mean, we can communicate, and at some level. I mean, some supervisors. I'm sorry, I try, but there is they stand completely in different position. But at least people like you and Supervisor Hildy. It's always a process to feeding information from each other, and I like that. I'm really proud of you guys. Okay.
Thank you, Luca. I appreciate that. I'm going to say something that even when we've disagreed, you've always been rational, and you've always had a logical analysis to support your decisions and your conclusions. It's not this knee-jerk emotional thinking that we so often see. There's actually some rigorous thought behind it. And what I think is great about humanity at our best is many people can apply rigorous thought to the same data points. And because they're different, each one of us is different, they can come up with different conclusions, different opinions, different plans. And hopefully we can come up with a plan between now and the beginning of August that minimizes the impact on our residents.
Listen, I want to say something for Mohave County. People ask me, oh my gosh, I've been traveling around the world a little bit when I was younger, before I came here to America. And I say, why are you here? you know what? I could be living in every part of the world. I have another part in another part of Arizona that I don't disclose, but it's my secret little hideout. But beside that, I chose Mohave County, and there is no other place I would like to live, even when I could afford almost everywhere I could. I like it here. And one of the reasons I like it here, it's not just the weather. It is because the opportunity that we have still to at least interact with our local, especially in the county. And I hate the cities, honestly. I couldn't live in a city. But in the county, Mohave County, we can still interact with our public servants, and we can try to make things better. Because after all, when we complain, if we do not try to put some input, we have no right to complain. That's all I can say. So I want to thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Luca, and I return that. Thank you for being on the radio. Thank you for keeping on raising these issues. I think you're performing a valuable service, and I'm glad you left Italy and came to America. We need more immigrants like you. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was Supervisor Stephen Moss from Mohave County, and we take a little break, and then we go another guest. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom with Luca Zanna. Do not go away.
Hey, you. Yes, I'm talking to you. You deserve a break. Enjoy a moment of indulgence. It's time for Zanna Coffee. Guilt-free pleasure. Zanna Coffee is the organic coffee to amplify your senses and enhance love for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Only the best organic and GMO-free coffee beans from around the world that I selected. Zanna Coffee brings you happiness in every cup. Fair trade certified, sustainable organic coffee. That means we do not use slaves. Free Zanna songs with every coffee bag. Find Zanna Coffee at www.zannacoffee.com. www.zannacoffee.com. Get your coffee bag now. Don't be cheap. Life is too short and you deserve the best. Zanna Coffee.
Here we go, guys and girls. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom with Luca Zanna on K-Talks 1340 AM. We just had the first part of the show, Mohave County Supervisor Stephen Moss. And I'm telling you, I really mean it. As much things are not perfect, because after all, we still live on planet Earth, here in Arizona, and even in Mohave County, of course. Guess what? Things can be better, or at least we can make it better. We have a hope. That's the point. We have some hope. We can work with our, public servants. They listen to us. You don't need to wait a month just to have a phone appointment. You can pretty much go and meet them at the public office, okay? That's it. It's our office. I like this. And this is, think about, in a county building that law-abiding people can go there without being harassed, be stressed. We can carry guns, open or concealed. I mean, that's the spirit, okay? The freedom. And of course, sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't agree, but at the end of the day, we can make things better. And I've been noticing, I've been witnessing, I believe in my humble way, being part of this process, like many other activists or just regular people who live in the county. They want to try to make it better. So we go there, we open our mouth, and I saw it changes in the last 8 years. So I'm impressed. Now, something that I'm not impressed, something that breaks my heart because I'm emotionally little attached. When I came from Italy, my first landing spot was California. Exactly, I was in Studio City, and I enjoy California. Don't get me wrong. That was almost 19 years ago now. And for me, coming from Italy was like, wow, especially in fall, winter, my first winter there, the beautiful weather, great people, at least, I like the people, the attitude, positive. Many things, of course, I didn't know yet. But immediately, not even after a few months walking around Los Angeles, I noticed that California was heading to trouble. Then, of course, you start to wake up, you start to understand what's going on. And I decided, I wanted to stay here as an American. I started to get involved, a more important concern. Because I saw California with a trend that was going to be to self-destruction. And that was 19 years ago, not even a few months after I was already there. And now, of course, you know the story. About 11 years ago, I was lucky enough to leave. And with a broken heart, because I had a beautiful place and I enjoyed there. I made pretty much my business. I started there, one of my businesses. And I really realized how things, they were going bad. And I was lucky enough to leave. But now, 11 years later, it's like almost seeing apocalypse now. I mean, the destruction. I met great people in California, people that really put their heart and also their bodies in try to save it, try to stop this trend.